If you're struggling with getting into flow, let's say you've been doing it and it's been happening on a daily basis, but then a couple of days go and you just can't seem to get back there, you might need to inject a little novelty into the situation. What's up, guys? I hope you're well. I want to talk to you today a little bit about the flow state, what it is, how to get in it, and how to stay in it for extended periods of time for greater productivity and to get more of the things that you want to do done. So firstly, what is the flow state? Hopefully you've either heard of it, but I certainly believe that you've probably experienced it. The flow state is basically when we get into that state of work where things are just happening. If it's writing a novel, it's just chapter after chapter is coming off of the page. If it's doing your favorite sport, you're just on it. You know, they pass the ball, you get it. You kick the ball, it goes exactly where you want it to be. And to the point with where you're doing this activity, you lose all sense of time and space, and you're just completely just lost in the moment. That's the flow state. It's a really productive state of mind. A lot of great things get done when we can get here. The problem that people find is that they either have very little control of how they get there, or they just can't. They just can't get into that frame of mind. So I want to give you a couple of tactics, a couple of things I use to help me achieve a state of flow, and more importantly, to be able to sustain it over a period of time. Number one is set up your environment to be conducive to flow, to help support you in getting into flow. Flow can only be done on one thing at a time. Your conscious mind can only hold one thing at a time. If I ask you to think about an elephant, then that is what you'll be able to think about. You can think of two things in the same space, but our mind is not able to be in two different places at the same time. We're not built for multitasking. So if you want to get into the state of flow with a certain particular job or task, that needs to be the only task that is available to you in that moment. So let's take the example of writing a novel, but apply this to whatever it is that you're trying to do it with. What do you need in order to write a novel? You'll need writing materials. So whether that's a pen and paper or a computer and a word processing software. Beyond that, you don't need an awful lot else. So that's a really important thing to understand. It's not as much about what you do need, but it's equally more important that you know what you do not need to have around you to be in that flow state with that certain task. So you don't need your phone. That can be switched off. That can be put in another room. That can be put on do not disturb mode. You don't need the internet. You don't need a web browser open or a window open. Now, you don't need music, but if you find that you write better to music, then just make sure that it's something that's not going to disrupt your thought process. So I would say something without any lyrics, without any singing or vocals, lo-fi hip-hop beats, jazz, classical music, all great examples that people use to help them get in that state of mind. Create an environment that supports what you're trying to do. So clear your desk. Make sure that the only thing on there is your writing materials. And if you need to reference something, try to have that reference be offline. So by that I mean, if you needed certain information, get it on another day. Do a research day where you can go on the internet, get the articles you need, save them as PDFs, screenshot them, find the books that you need, highlight them, tab them, whatever you need to do so that when it comes to the day where you're going to write, rather than risking going on the internet and being distracted by the many things on there, you've got access to the materials you need and you've got access to the tools you need in order to do the job. The second thing after environment is triggers. So the flow state works best when you have certain things that trigger your mind and teach it that you are about to go into this state. So we already spoke about potentially having music. So it might be a certain playlist that you only use for this task. Certain songs, certain tracks that your mind then builds an association with to doing the task that you've put yourself at hand. That's a great trigger for putting you in flow. You might have a certain place that you sit, like I said, your desk. A great way to talk about triggers is actually in regards to workouts. So for example, I've got certain clothes, certain shoes, certain headphones that I put on as I go to the gym. I have a certain playlist that I use on my way to the gym to get me in the right frame of mind. And then when I walk through those gym doors, that in itself is a trigger. The smell of the gym, the sights and things you see, they all put me in the right frame of mind to go in and do what I need to do, which is do my workout. So we want to be able to duplicate those ideas and those triggers into any situation where we want to be able to get ourselves in a high level state of focus. So think about the things that trigger you when you've previously got into this state of mind and try to introduce them on purpose and put them in place so that they're there when you want to do it. And finally, this one kind of bounces off of the other two, is use novelty. If you're struggling with getting into flow, let's say you've been doing it and it's been happening on a daily basis, but then a couple of days go and you just can't seem to get back there, you might need to inject a little novelty into the situation. So go back to the example of the writer trying to write their book. Maybe you need to go sit in a park and write the next chapter. Maybe you need to go sit in a coffee shop. If that's not an option, maybe you just need to go to another room. I know we talk often about having a workspace that's specifically just for getting work done, and that's very true. But if you find yourself being blocked, it often means that you just need to shake things up a little bit. And that little bit of novelty can often be enough to get you where you want to be in terms of your headspace. If you've been going to the gym for a few days and suddenly you're just really not enjoying it and you're constantly distracted and you're not feeling it, you need to switch it up. Maybe you need to go for a run for a few days. Maybe you need to go do some pull-ups in the park or do some push-ups on a bench. You need to just inject a little novelty, refresh the whole system, and then you might find that you find that flow state in a slightly different location or with a slightly different setup than what you're used to. Then when you go back to your original setup, that novelty continues because that then feels a little bit fresh and a little bit new. We're trying to avoid things becoming mundane by over repeating and doing them too often. Make sense? So those are 3 things you can use to help you get into flow and stay in that state for extended periods of time. Make sure you manage your environment, get rid of distractions, make sure you have everything you need before you start so that there's nothing that can pull you out, because that's what happens. Once you come out of it, it's very difficult to go back in. You need to make sure that your environment is set up in a way that once you're there for as long as you need to be. Have triggers that kind of preempt the moment so that you build up into it rather than just trying to start cold. You go from doing nothing to trying to do whatever the task is, but there's nothing to kind of gear up your mind and put it in the right frame to get this task done. And finally, if you found that you were getting it fine, but now you're struggling, you just need to introduce a little bit of novelty into the mix so that you can freshen up the whole approach. Guys, I hope that helps. And as always, take care of yourself.